So, thank you very much, Claudia Wedepol. And before I start my lecture in English, please let me say some words in German. Ja, ich möchte ganz herzlich danken, dass ich hier teilnehmen kann und hoffe, dass ich gut zu hören bin, weil ich mich immer doppelt höre, aber gut. Ja, ich danke vor allem dem Haus der Kulturen der Welt und dem Warburg Institute und allen Organisatorinnen und vor allem dem Team, das uns so hervorragend und engmaschig betreut hat und eine digitale Teilnahme möglich macht. Nur kurze Situation, um es zu erklären. Ich sehe Sie, liebes Publikum, leider nicht, aber Sie sehen hoffentlich mich. Bevor ich beginne, möchte ich kurz auf die Hintergründe und Kontexte meines Vortrags eingehen und öffne deshalb die erste Folie auf das vom Europäischen Forschungsrat geförderte ESC-Projekt Metromod, das am Institut für Kunstgeschichte der LMU München angesiedelt ist und sich mit 6 globalen Metropolen als Zufluchtsorte für emigrierte Künstlerinnen und Künstler in der ersten Hälfte des 20. Jahrhunderts beschäftigt. Und darunter sind Städte wie Shanghai, Mumbai, Istanbul, Buenos Aires, New York, aber eben auch London. Sie können unser Projekt auf der Webseite metromod.net besuchen, wo wir auch einen Blog haben und demnächst digitale Walks durch die Metromod-Städte und unser Online-Archiv publizieren werden. Mein Vortrag wird auf einer dieser Städte blicken, und zwar London als Exilstadt. Und es ist passend, dass diese Tagung heute hier in Berlin stattfindet, das in der Gegenwart ein wichtiger Zufluchtsort für exilierte oder geflüchtete Künstler und Künstlerinnen aus aller Welt ist. Mir war das jetzt wichtig, auch diesen Bogen in die Gegenwart zu schlagen. Ich werde mich heute auf die Ausstellung Alice Inside Germany der Immigrantenorganisation Free German League of Culture oder Freier Deutscher Kulturbund beziehen und im letzten Drittel des Vortrags eine vergleichende Perspektive auf eine Ausstellung des Warburg Institutes in London aufmachen, die Schau English Art and the Mediterranean, ohne allzu sehr in die Tiefe zu gehen, da noch der Vortrag von Johannes von Müller folgt. Wenn sich dennoch Überschneidungen ergeben, bitte ich das zu entschuldigen, aber ich glaube, dass diese Interferenzen durchaus produktiv sein können. Noch ist mir wichtig vorab, bevor ich gleich auf Englisch meinen Vortrag halte, darauf hinzuweisen, dass Forschung nicht für sich allein stehen, sondern immer auf einer eigenen Forschungs- und Wissensgeschichte basieren, die ich hier ganz kurz vorab benennen möchte. Für die Ausstellung Alice Inside Germany und die Free German League of Culture rezipierte ich die grundlegenden Publikationen von Cordula Frohwein, von Jutta Vincent, Anna Müller-Herlin, Charmian Brinson und Richard Dove. Für English Art and the Mediterranean waren für mich vor allem die Ausstellung und Publikation am Zentralinstitut für Kunstgeschichte in München 2019 substanziell, die maßgeblich von Joanne Anderson, Johannes von Müller und Mick Finch verantwortet wurden. Und zudem beziehe ich mich in meinen Ausführungen auf Aufsätze von Dorothea McEwen und Katja Masuko. Besonders wichtig waren für mich auch das digitale Hartfield-Archiv der Akademie der Künste Berlin und das Digitalisierungsprojekt Deutsche Exilpresse. Das kann ich nur allen empfehlen, durch das die Zeitschrift Freie Deutsche Kultur, das Nachrichtenorgan des Freien Deutschen Kulturbundes, online zugänglich ist. Ich möchte jetzt auch nur ganz kurz die Gelegenheit nutzen, auf ein großartiges Festival aufmerksam zu machen, das bereits das gesamte vergangene Jahr vor allem in London das Wirken und Nachleben der europäischen Emigration nach Großbritannien nach 1933 zum Thema hatte und hat das von Monika Bohn-Duchesne organisierte Insiders-Outsiders Festival, das auch das Warburg Institute, soweit ich beobachtet habe, zum Partner hat. I turn now into English and will start my lecture. In 1942, the show Alice Inside Germany, which was organized by the Freier Deutscher Kulturbund, also known as the Free German League of Culture, opened in London to give the resistance within Germany visibility. Since 1939, Great Britain was at war with Germany. In 1940, German air raids on English cities had led to numerous destructions and war deaths. At the same time, and as a consequence, the British population was sworn into the necessary war against Germany through political speeches, articles, and visual propaganda. This put the German-speaking emigrants in England in a difficult position, as they had to convince the locals that not every German was an enemy. The internment of numerous people persecuted by the Nazi regime around 1940 shows how difficult the situation of the emigrants in their country of exile was. The Free German League of Culture, founded by emigrants, was an association of cultural producers who organized exhibitions, concerts, readings, and plays, with a headquarter in London Hampstead. The League was committed to the promotion of a free German culture, meaning art, literature, and music that had not been politically appropriated by National Socialism. It also wanted to contribute to understanding between the English population and the refugees. The Free German League of Culture organized several exhibitions, partly in cooperation with other organizations, such as the Artists International Association. The group exhibition of drawings, paintings, and sculptures from 1944 gave, with 50 works, an impression of the diversity of artistic expression in the German-speaking emigrant community. Exhibitions such as Camp Art in Canada, exhibition of interned refugees' art and poetry from 1941, and you see the advertisement here on the slide for this exhibition, drew attention to the internees overseas. Artists' Aid Jewry from 1943 was dedicated to the Jewish victims of National Socialism and brought together 137 works by 39 artists. The exhibition, Allies Inside Germany, opened on 3rd July 1942 in an empty shop at 149 Regent Street and was on show there until 16 August 1942. The duration was extended due to the many visitors. And you see here a Google plan to show that the exhibition was right at the very center of London, next to Oxford Circus Underground and Piccadilly Circus, and not at the clubhouse of the Free German League, which was in Hampstead. I think they decided to be there right in the center to be more visible. The exhibition had an enlightening purpose and a double objective. It was to convince the English that there were potential allies in Germany, in other words, good Germans who were fighting the battle from within. This made it clear that the Nazi regime was not built on solid ground throughout, but that there were certainly efforts to undermine the dictatorship. At the same time, the war moral of the British in the fight against fascism was to be strengthened, and emigrants were also to be encouraged. For the successes of the Nazi troops fueled fears and worries that they would not be safe even in England. The Blitz, the bombing raid by German planes in 1940-41, had already shown how vulnerable England was as a place of refuge. On display in the exhibition were photographs, pamphlets, and illegal publications from Germany, as well as works such as photomontages and materials produced in exile. The exhibition was a joint production. Hans Fladung from the art section of the Free German League produced the 27 panels of the exhibition together with the Free German Youth. Heinz Werner organized the documentary material. René Gretz was responsible for the invitation card. You see it at the right corner. And John Hartfield supplied the photomontages. After his escape from the first exile in Prague in December 1938, John Hartfield lived in London. Before and during his emigration in Prague, he regularly designed front pages for the Arbeiter Illustrierte Zeitung, AIZ, which called for resistance against National Socialism and exposed the political leaders of the party. During his exile in England, Hartfield continued his political work under other auspices as a fight of the exiled artist against Hitler. It is not for nothing that Hartfield's first retrospective in the Arcade Gallery, London, in 1939 was called One Man's War Against Hitler. Unlike before, Hartfield did not have a political organ like the AIZ in which he could regularly publish his photomontages, but had to act more flexible. In addition to book covers for the publisher Lindsay Drummond, there are works for magazines such as Picture Post, you see it here on the screen. Hartfield's commitment to the Free German League of Culture is also central, with his name appearing frequently in its newsletter Freie Deutsche Kultur. You see an article on Daumier im Reich by Hartfield, which was published in this newsletter or bulletin. Hartfield's photomontages played a key role in the exhibition Alleys Inside Germany, and it is thinkable that he not only contributed with some photomontages, but was responsible for the concept of all panels, which can be read as overall photomontages. The 27 panels were dedicated to themes or years, showed resistance, subordination, and also offered an appearance to the emigrants themselves, whose position as resistant was thus exposed. In this way, the panels did not show the emigrants as victims, but rather emphasized their attitude in the fight against the Hitler regime. The panel dedicated to 1933 bears the inscription, "Hitler comes to power," and the terror that enabled and accompanied the seizure of power. Photographs were collaged side by side and explained with text, and statistics show that Hitler came to power, although the NSDAP had suffered considerably losses in the last free election on 6 November 32 and received 33.1% of the votes. The 1934 panel shows how the NSDAP and its officials established themselves in power and put the German people on course. One by one is a phrase repeated on many plates, showing how the European states and their governments laid down arms or made deals with Hitler. Part of this panel is a work by John Hartfield, which appeared in the AIZ on 19 July 1934 and was dedicated to the Night of the Long Knives, that is 30 June 1934, when Hitler had the SA leadership around Ernst Röhm eliminated. Still dying, the SA man raises his arm in a Hitler salute. This photomontage is dedicated to a central event of 1934, which served to secure Hitler's power and at the same time revealed that he did not hesitate to murder his own followers. At the same time, this photomontage also marks a resistant position within the panel. As an opposition newspaper, the AIZ and its artist Hartfield also drew attention to the violence and crimes of the Nazi dictatorship in this work. This makes it clear that the panels in Alleys Inside Germany cannot be read solely as a chronology of the Nazi regime and its expansion of power, but rather visualize resistance as a phenomenon accompanying and disturbing the Nazi regime. So if resistance was already possible in the midst of fascism, the panel suggests that it should also be possible in the threatened but still free England of 1942. 22nd June 1941 marks the day of the German invasion of the Soviet Union, but at the same time shows how the Netherlands, Belgium, Yugoslavia, Denmark, France, and Greece were occupied and brought to their knees by the Nazi army. This list on a single panel shows how quickly the expansion of power proceeded without significant resistance from other states. Churchill is one of the politicians who acted in speeches but let events run their course. The panel on Stalin shows the political leader of the Soviet Union as the main head in the military struggle against German troops on the Eastern Front. Plans had been in place since late 1941 for the anti-Hitler alliance to establish a second front. The attack on the Axis powers was expected to lead to the withdrawal of German forces from the Eastern Front and help relieve the Soviet Union. A photomontage designed by John Hartfield for the exhibition shows a pocket watch which with the needle 5 to 12. Hitler and Goering pull on a rope with the help of Goebbels, who is too small to stop the minute hand and stop the Allies' victory over Germany. The time is a threatening gesture and a reminder in two senses. It signals to the Nazi regime that its time is about to run out, and to the British public that it is about 2:12 for the Second Front. Allies inside Germany was conceptually oriented towards exhibitions such as the first International Dada Fair from 1920. You see the photograph on the left, in which John Hartfield participated and which addressed its audience with posters, photographs, installations. The dramaturgy of Allies inside Germany is also reminiscent of the Deutsche Bauausstellung of 1931 in Berlin. You see two images on the right, which presented the achievements of German building policy in the 1920s in text and images, and also worked via direct addresses, cut out photographs and diagrams. In all the exhibitions mentioned above, photography was considered to have great impact and persuasive power. It is interesting to read Allies inside Germany in the context of an exhibition that took place shortly before in London, which also used visual persuasion strategies. English Art and the Mediterranean opened on December 1941 at the Warburg Institute, which at the time was housed in the empty Imperial Institute buildings in South Kensington, close to the Victoria and Albert Museum. The exhibition was part of a lively exhibition activity that was intended to draw greater attention to the Warburg Institute, which had emigrated from Hamburg, we heard before, to London in 1933. The exhibitions of the Warburg Institute were didactic and designed as instruments of visual education. And I only name some of the other exhibitions without going into detail. English Art and the Mediterranean was preceded by the visual approach to the classics, an exhibition of Greek and Roman art in 1939, and Indian art in 1940. Portrait and character followed in 1943. These exhibitions functioned through photographic reproductions, which were arranged in an explanatory way. English Art and the Mediterranean traces historical links between British art production and that of the Mediterranean. The Warburg Institute's exhibition took place during wartime and attracted more than 10,000 visitors. In war years, many museum collections had been taken away from London. Some institutions were closed and only a few exhibitions were still on show. The reproductions of the Warburg Institute thus offered an opportunity to deal with historical works through the medium of photography. Although the content and themes of the two exhibitions differ, there's some overlap between English Art and the Mediterranean of the Warburg Institute and Allies inside Germany of the Free German League of Culture. Both used photography for their exhibition. In doing so, they used a medium that had received extensive attention in science, news reporting, and as an artistic medium since the turn of the century at the latest. The format of the show or exhibition board gave the absent a representative presence. In the Warburg Institute's project, the paintings and engravings, in Allies inside Germany, the events, people, and interactions. The photographic medium also led to a certain standardization. In the Warburg project, for example, the merging of genres such as painting, drawing, or engraving of photographed buildings. In addition, text was used far less prominently here. In Alice Inside Germany, the apparent truth of press photography was drawn into the project. Press photos were used whose realism was supposed to shake, expose, even affect. Anger and fear, sadness and confidence were the potential consequences of the exhibition visit. In the photographs and the constellations on the panels, content could be created, commented on, and relationships established. These relationships brought into dialogue various things that had actually been created in different places and at different times. Thus, architectural photographs were presented in the context of scientific illustrations and object photographs of museum artifacts. The bracket or roof for the heterogeneous picture show was provided by the picture panels or movable walls on which a group of photographs was assembled. English art in the Mediterranean showed more than 500 photographs on 65 blackboards, which discussed the artistic transfer between the Mediterranean region and England in various chapters, such as Mediterranean traces in prehistoric Britain, astrology, the revival of pagan goods in everyday life, or Neo-Greek architecture. The compilation of the photographs under different headings created connections, stimulated views and interpretations, produced contexts of meaning. Alice Inside Germany worked in a similar way, assigning exhibits to the chapters of the rise and establishment of National Socialism, the military expansion of its sphere of power, and the resistance exhibits which referred to each other but could also always be read in connection with a caption. The dramaturgy of the exhibitions, Alice Inside Germany and English Art in the Mediterranean, can be summed up by two concepts of Bildwissenschaft or image theory. In both exhibitions, the individual picture is assigned to plural and polyphonic contexts in the course of a complication, so that one can speak of a hyper-image. Felix Türlemann understands this as a, I quote him, calculated combination of selected pictorial objects, paintings, drawings, photographs, and sculptures to form a new overarching entity. Comparative perception sharpens the individuality of the individual work. Peculiarities become visible, which would not have been visible if the work had been presented in isolation, quote end. The hyperimage comprises pictorial structures, plural pictorial orders, and refers to the meaning-generating interplay of individual images. It is only in the combination of different reproduced images and image media that an argumentation develops in English Art in the Mediterranean and Alice Inside Germany. The logic of the thesis is visually fixed. A second approach is the concept of juxtaposition. Juxtaposition means that things that are closely related or adjacent to each other can be placed in relation to each other, even though they are sometimes far removed from each other in terms of content. Juxtaposition comes from the Latin iuxta for next door and positio for location or position. How prominent the method of juxtaposition was in England in the 1930s and 40s, and how large the share of emigrants in this visual rhetoric was, can be illustrated by the magazine Lilliput. The journalist Stefan Lorent, who had emigrated from Munich to London and founded the picture-intensive magazines Picture Post and Lilliput, was incidentally a patron and client of John Hartfield, and he used juxtapositions as a concept with great success in the pocket magazine Lilliput. You see here some examples. In this magazine, even in political contexts, supposedly distant pictorial content was compiled on a double page. Lilliput was a pocket-sized magazine and a satirical journal at the same time, with literary contributions by Upton Sinclair and Lyme O'Flaherty, and a visual focus on photography. Lilliput worked with pairs of images in which new and often humoristic connections were created between two photographs. Presumably Laurent adapted the idea of the juxtapositions from the German magazine Der Querschnitt and discovered their potential for the English market. Moreover, the juxtaposition of photographs, diagrams, and writing was a tried and tested means in exhibitions of the 1920s in the Weimar Republic, such as those in the Kulturwissenschaftliche Bibliothek Warburg, but also in shows such as the Neubauausstellung in Berlin and the Bauausstellung in Berlin from 1930. The juxtaposition of even supposedly disparate media as a possible means of convincing the viewer is demonstrated by the strategy of Alice Inside Germany to include three-dimensional books alongside flat photography and photomontage. You see it on the left. Thus, a display dedicated to the immigrants shows an interplay of image on the display wall and book in the lower display. This makes the rhetoric more vivid and plausible and shows the work of the emigrants as concrete and tangible. The exhibition dedicated to the poet Ovid in the reading room of the Kulturwissenschaftliche Bibliothek Warburg in Hamburg, here on the right, had already argued in a similar way, closing the picture panel Rape Proserpina, for example, you see it here, at the bottom with a row of open books held by a white thread. The fact that both exhibitions, here English Art in the Mediterranean and Alice Inside Germany, were framed and additionally explained in lectures is also very interesting, thus placing the exhibited pictures in an extended word context. The Warburg Institute organized the lectures on English art and the Mediterranean together with the Quartet Institute. And in just 2 months, from December 1941 to 42, 24 public lectures were held covering central themes of the exhibition. The series of lectures deepened the exhibition thesis and promoted the exhibition at the same time. And it had also another effect. Local and emigrate scholars from the Warburg Institute surroundings gave lectures, including Frederik Antal, Emil Kemmertz, Kenneth Clark, Ernst Gombrich, Otto Pecht, Nikolaus Pevsner. This shows that the Warburg Institute also contributed to the presence and recognition of emigrated researchers by enabling them to perform in an ensemble of renowned or younger British scientists. Alice Inside Germany also offered an accompanying program, which was announced in the invitation flyer, from film, concerts, and plays to lectures by Hans Rehfisch and Felix Alban that took place at various locations: the Clubhouse of the Free German League of Culture, the Everyman Theatre at Hampstead Underground Station, or Caxton Hall, Victoria. All events were dedicated to the resistance against National Socialism and reinforced the central theme of the exhibition, which described National Socialism as violent and destructive, but the struggle against dictatorship as vital. Most of the events were open to members and guests and were thus designed to attract public attention. Alice Inside Germany went on tour through England and was shown in Birmingham, Glasgow, Manchester, Leeds, Oxford, Leicester, and Cambridge, among many others, with a total of 160,000 visitors. In London alone, there were 30,000 visitors. The numerous show stations placed demands on the exhibition. It had to be transportable and easy to set up and dismantle. The objects on display were not allowed to be too valuable, as the premises, think of the shop in London, did not allow for increased security measures, and there was likely to be a dense crowd. And, very important, the political message of the exhibition had to be able to reach the public quickly and without detours. Another important challenge was that the panels had to be changed. Cordula Frohwein writes that some chapter titles of the exhibition, Allies Inside Germany, were changed after criticism of the visualization of the resistance against the NS in Germany, which was perceived as idealizing. German labor and active ally became potential ally, and even the exhibition title itself was changed on tour to We Accuse 10 Years of Hitler Fascism. It can be concluded from this that a concept existed for the exhibition and the individual panels, but these only really took shape in the work process and underwent various adaptations as the exhibition stations progressed. And you see at the right, you see a photograph showing Barbara Cartledge before Emma Feistman working on one of the panels. English Art in the Mediterranean was also a touring exhibition that was shown in various locations and with organizational support, as Joanne Anderson notes, from the circulation department of the Victoria and Albert Museum. The simple, highly mobile installation of the exhibition on panels on which the photographs were mounted was predestined for this. Between 1941 and 44, the exhibition was shown not only in London, but also in more than 20 other British cities, such as Exeter, Liverpool, Leicester, Cambridge, and Darlington. The show had a political effect along the expanding war, because it was on show from 1941 until 1944 in different cities. Even if the organizers did not want to be aware of it, the war with the aggressor Germany, which raged on the European continent, and the successful resistance of the Brits turned the distance between the island and the mainland into an important bulwark. In these times, it was all the more important to appeal to the British population as part of Europe, to convey to them the historical and cultural links, for example, with the countries of the Mediterranean region, some of which were Germany's allies, like Italy, or were occupied by Nazi troops. English art in the Mediterranean appealed to the self-image of the British to see themselves as an important part of a Europe threatened by fascism. Empathy and resistance were inevitably promoted by the themes of the exhibition, and at the same time, the important connection to the European continent was thematized. In this respect, English art in the Mediterranean was ultimately also a political exhibition, but it addressed its audience on a different level and less offensively or propagandistically than Allies Inside Germany. Allies Inside Germany, as well as English art in the Mediterranean, were exhibitions that reached their audience through a still young medium by using photographs, and were the result of the efforts of London emigrants. Allies Inside Germany acted against the Nazi dictatorship within the bounds of the political possibilities and in times of war by addressing the emigrants in order to strengthen their persistence and their political and cultural activities. In particular, however, the local English-born population was addressed, who should learn to distinguish between the hostile National Socialist Germans and the emigrants who were active against the dictatorship. English art in the Mediterranean, in turn, showed that emigrants made their own contribution to understanding English art and cultural history. It was also intended to strengthen the British people's own self-image as part of Europe, for the challenge of the Second World War was not only about national self-protection against German troops, but also about support and empathy for occupied states and those persecuted by the Nazi regime. Thank you very much.